Not just they can do that on our airwaves, but that they can do that as one of us, as badge-carrying employees, as paid contributors to our sacred airwaves.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
John, I have to play that every once in a while to remind us that we have to be very careful about what we say because we are on the sacred airwaves. The sacred airwaves.
Not to be confused with publicly funded airwaves, which would be St. Louis Public Radio or KCUR or KBIBI in Columbia, Brad. But, owned by a wacky, eccentric guy that lets us say largely whatever we want to say on the air.
God, can you believe it? That is John Combest, Combest. You can check out his website at johncombest.com. He does this every single day. He puts together this extensive list of all what he thinks are the important stories around the state of Missouri. We start the show off with this guy.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what does he do?
We're on our way to the number one.
He counts them down, and we start with...
In third place.
Last Thursday night, Brad, two very special guests were in Kansas City. We haven't talked about this much, and it garnered very few news headlines from Missouri media. What two political celebrities, Brad, I'm going to put you on the spot, were in Kansas City on Thursday night?
Thursday night, really? Are they still in political office? Will you give me a hint?
They're not in political office, but, Brad, they are news people who you are quite familiar with.
News people. Dan Rather and...
Diane Rehm.
Oh,
I'll just give you the answer. Dan Rather and Diane Rehm.
What was that?
No, Brad. The answer is Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly were in Kansas City over the weekend. And, Brad, if you didn't hear much about it, it's because there was next to no media coverage. Imagine that, Brad. Mainstream media in Missouri is not moved by the fact that two influential conservatives are in Kansas City. Brad, you can check out a whole host of information about this. If you go to my website on Saturday, the headlines for Saturday, you can hear Pete Mundo in Kansas City. He had a conversation with Mark Alford, the U.S. congressman who was there. And then today up on the website, I have a link to Garrett Bowles' show on KWTO, All the Above. He was there. He gave a firsthand account. I also have a link to the full interview that Tucker Carlson did, a sit-down interview-style deal in Kansas City with Megyn Kelly. Now, Brad, the unique thing about this is I also linked to Tony's Kansas City, and Tony points out that there was no media coverage, with the exception of Pete Mundo talking about it on Friday. There was no Kansas City media coverage of Tucker Carlson. Could you imagine if someone from MSNBC came to downtown St. Louis? In fact, you don't have to imagine. You just have to go back and look at St. Louis Public Radio archives or Post-Dispatch archives. If a media mini-celebrity from a left-wing outlet comes to town, oh my gosh, we have to go celebrate it. We have to promote it. We have to encourage people to be there. But of course, it's Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, and nobody's going to promote it among mainstream media in Kansas City. I would love to stand corrected. So if you're listening to this and you've seen other Missouri coverage of Tucker Carlson, please send it to me and I'll be happy to link to it. So, Brad, it sounds like it was a pretty cool event. The headline stealer, the showstopper, so to speak, was Megyn Kelly was not happy about the fact that Taylor Swift has endorsed Kamala Harris, a.k.a. Kamala Harris, for president. So she had some choice words for Taylor's decision there.
What were they doing in Kansas City? Was it just like a meet and greet kind of thing or what?
No, it was a tour. So I guess according to Garrett's show, now Garrett helped smarten me up listening to his show, that Tucker goes to different cities, and in different cities he has different guests. So I guess in one city he had Kid Rock, and, you know, he has other big name guests, and he just chose to come to Kansas City. Now, they announced this a few months ago because I've had links to this up on my website before. But, you know, I'm more moved by the fact, Brad, that mainstream media chose to not cover this. But we shouldn't be surprised by that. But it's still irksome if you care about these sort of things.
You know, this is, well, I won't say anything. Move on to number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Conversation and debate about the abortion amendment on Missouri's November ballot continues. That's known as Amendment 3. I would point people to, let's call them 3 links that I have up today. There's 2 interviews and then 1 progressive blog post. The 2 interviews, Brad, Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman was on 2 shows. One of them is my favorite show. One of them is Scott Vaughn's This Week in Missouri Politics, where Mary Elizabeth talked a little bit about some of the lesser known provisions and the unintended consequences, if you will, of what could happen from Missouri's Amendment 3. She was also on Mark Reardon's show on Friday, the Reardon Roundtable. Did you catch any of that, Brad?
I did not. I did not listen to him on Friday. I missed it.
Okay. The other favorite quote, I think, or maybe my favorite, there were 2 great quotes from Reardon's show. I'll just pull them out now. My second favorite quote from Reardon's show on Friday was, there's a Democrat named Steve Butz, the unfortunately named Steve Butz from St. Louis City. And he was talking about, you know how the Haitians are eating pets in Ohio. And Butz referred to them as, quote, these illegal people. Now, I want to give Steve Butz credit because it's rare that Democrats today in 2024 speak in such realistic, truthful tone, Brad. It's rare that they choose their words so accurately. So for Steve Butz to call these pet-eating Haitians, quote, these illegal people, kudos to him for that. And then my favorite quote from Reardon's show was Mary Elizabeth was talking about, people are largely decided if they're going to vote for Trump or Harris. And she said, I'd encourage people to think if you're better off now, or if you're better off 4 years ago than you were today, I'd encourage you to vote for Donald Trump. She said, and if you think you're better off today than you were 4 years ago, I'd encourage you to see a psychiatrist. She's got jokes, Brad. She's got jokes. So check out her interview on Scott's show. It's fantastic. And then she has, she was able to jump in. Jane Duker was on the show, on Reardon's show on Friday. And they talked, of course, about Tyreek Hill and the whole Tyreek Hill thing that we discussed on the show last week. So Amendment 3, Brad. Oh, and the third piece, I don't want to leave you hanging. The third piece there is about the fact that a lot of these statewide campaigns have already secured TV time for November and late October. One of those campaigns, of course, is the pro-Amendment 3, pro-abortion initiative petition campaign. And then I don't want to tease it too early in case you want to continue talking about number 2, Brad. But one of those statewide initiatives is also the topic of our number 1 story for today.
I will just say this briefly. I talked to one of my friends last evening who is a dyed-in-the-wool NFL fan. And the comment that was made was, I've watched NFL for 7 hours so far today, and I've seen nothing but Kamala Harris ads, and I've not seen one Donald Trump ad. Now, once again, that's anecdotal, one person. But still, don't you think that's sort of weird that you've got one candidate who's like all over NFL and the other candidate who's not even there? Is that a budget thing?
Yeah, I think it's great because is your friend in Missouri?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well then, yeah, that's awesome that the Harris campaign is wasting money on a state they won't win.
Well, I guess you could look at it that way. Okay, now
The number 1
top story today, Brad, I would point to the progressive blog, Missouri Independent, and their top blogger there, a guy named Rudy Keller, has a piece. The headline is, Missouri Initiative Campaigns Launch TV Spending After Surviving Court Challenges. Now, here's why this is interesting, Brad. I think this is one of the first times that we've had a piece that has referenced the group that has been formed to oppose the sports gambling ballot measure. And the group opposing it is called Missourians Against the Deceptive Online Gambling Amendment. Now, we don't know, which, by the way, is more than a mouthful. Call Hooters, because that's more than a mouthful. Missourians Against the Deceptive Online Gambling Amendment. Now, this group was just formed, Brad, and they announced their formation last Tuesday. So it's unclear at this point who is funding them, or if it's been called out. I haven't read any coverage of this. And there's a woman they have a spokeswoman by the name of Brooke Foster. So folks might remember that name because Brooke Foster, there's a prominent cannabis activist in Missouri named Brooke Foster. I believe she is the CEO of a cannabis company. Someone in the cannabis space will inevitably text me after the show and let me know if I'm right about that. But perhaps it's that Brooke Foster who has a really good reputation for being quite involved in the cannabis movement. I believe she might be the CEO of a cannabis company. Anyway, but her quote, Brad, is, quote, "In reality, Amendment 2 contains no guarantees that a single penny will go to our schools." Now, as you know, and as Rudy Keller from the Missouri Independent points out, under the Missouri Constitution, all taxes on casino gambling and the state share of lottery ticket sales must be spent on education programs. Now, on behalf of the folks who were with the Kids Win Missouri or Missouri Wins with Gambling, I'm being facetious here, but Jack Cardetti, the spokesman for the group, says the sports wagering amendment will keep its promise to bring in tens of millions each year. So he says there is little likelihood lawmakers will reduce current spending on education. So we have one group, Brad, that says don't trust the casino industry. Maybe it'll be another bait and switch, like we've seen before with casinos. And then the sports wagering groups say, no, we're gonna bring in tens of millions of dollars, and there's nothing to worry about. Essentially, take our word for it.
Okay, now let me go back a minute. I'm still confused on this. The lady, this Brooke Foster lady, who is in the cannabis industry, allegedly, we're not exactly sure it's the same.
She may be the same Brooke Foster. I'm not sure. I'm looking it up right now, actually, Brad.
Okay, so the cannabis people are against sports betting?
No, Brad. So let's just pause right there. I pointed out the fact that there's a woman named Brooke Foster,
right,
and she's chief executive officer of Show Me Alternatives. Maybe there's another Brooke Foster running around Missouri, Brad. That's entirely possible.
Okay.
So let's not conflate these two, and let's not suggest that the cannabis industry is opposed to this measure.
But
I'm pointing out Brooke Foster as CEO of Show Me Alternatives as a biographical fact, Brad.
Okay, but a Brooke Foster is on a TV commercial telling you not to vote for sports
she's not
gaming.
on a TV commercial. She's quoted in the Missouri Independent piece by Rudy Keller.
Okay, so she's quoted as saying, do not vote for the sports betting because
that's correct. Yep.
She's
that's
saying
right.
that the money won't go for education.
You're exactly right, Brad.
And Mr. Cardetti says, Balderdash, we're going to make our kids, every last kid's going to come out of school, they're going to eclipse Einstein's IQ when we get done with them.
Now, Jack would never go that far out on a limb. And at the risk of, let's not be too flip, Brad, which I was earlier. The name of the group is Winning for Missouri Education. And that is not to be confused with Escorts for Education.
How about Decades of Difference?
Boy, that was a hit over the weekend, Brad.
Or how about my favorite, Cocaine for Kids? How about that one?
Right. Yeah.
Hey, the next time you do that white line, remember that part of the money you spent for that cocaine is helping little Billy and little Jimmy and little Jilly to be a better student. Yes, when you are like banged out of your mind by that Colombian cocaine, remember, part of it paid for a textbook, although they don't use textbooks anymore in schools, but it did pay for a textbook, right?
It would be all digital. And you know what? They have started this actually in Ohio because they have cocaine for cats. It's part of the Haitian community, Brad. Jean-Pierre and Marie just got here from Haitian.
John.
Which is a new company, Haitian. Yeah, go ahead.
You're the font of information. Okay, I'm going to ask a question, which, once again, maybe I don't watch or listen to the right news sources, but I've never heard anybody address how did 20,000 Haitians end up in a little town in Ohio? Can someone explain that to me?
Yeah, it's black magic.
No, how did they end up there? I mean, did they cross the border together and go, hey, we're going to Ohio? I mean, I don't get it. How did that happen?
They all came in. Actually, this has been documented. They all came in on a Rawlings baseball truck. You know how they stitch baseballs in Haiti? So they all just hopped on the truck, and they're pretty skinny. We have it documented. They're starving. That's why they're eating people's pets. But you can smush a lot of Haitians into a Rawlings baseball truck, right?
So what, John, you're
telling?
And
then they get to a Major League Baseball city, and they're like, "Where's our baseballs?" We're like, "We don't know. Where's Garfield?"
So what you're telling me, you don't know either, correct? Is that what
you're? Yeah.
I mean, I keep hearing this. I'm going like, okay, I understand, because here's the interesting thing. St. Louis is somewhat of a melting pot. You go back through the generations and, the Germans, and then you've got the various areas. You've got the Hill. You've got, which is predominantly Italian or maybe all Italian. You've got Dogtown, which, and do you know, a listener last week sent me a little thing about this. Do you know why they call it Dogtown?
Well, yeah, because they would steal people's dogs and eat them.
That's exactly right.
And most people don't. I didn't mean to step on the end of your sentence there, Brad, but most people don't know that. Of course, it's called Dogtown because they would steal your pets and eat them.
Right. And I'm going. But see, the crazy thing about this is that this comes out of nowhere. Up until the presidential debates, I'm going like, okay, how did a town of 40,000 people gain 20,000 people? And because I'm a freak on this. I've actually read many times on this show. I have read demographic information where I chronicle, this city in 1950 had 20,000 people, and today it has 120,000 people. Like the St. Charles County thing. You go back, 100 years, and St. Charles County had like 5,000 people. Now it's, probably, bumping 430,000 people right now. And once again, you go back 40 years or 50 years, and the city of St. Louis had almost 1 million people. Now it's down to like 276,000. What's going on? Why is that?
Yeah.
But you rarely see a town that has, what percentage increase is that? If you got 40,000 people, all of a sudden 20,000 people show up. So now I have 60. What is that? Like a 40?
It's a 50% increase.
50% increase. Okay, a 50% increase over a very, very short period of time. How does that happen? Where do they stay? Are they? Is there like a community? Like are they in like a camp or something like that?
By definition, I think they stay in a cat house.
Well. But see, the other thing is there's interesting stories about, I've read all these crazy stories about this town in Ohio, Springfield, Ohio, that the insurance rates have gone up, car insurance has gone up because the Haitians are supposedly bad drivers. How do they get cars? Once again, to own a car nowadays is not cheap. If, you're going to buy even like the kind of cars I buy, but still, the insurance is expensive. How do they get insurance? To the point where how do they do anything? They probably don't have IDs. You know what I mean? How many times over the weekend, in your normal life, how many times do people ask you to show your ID? And how do you get by with not having an ID? I heard a guy over the weekend, again, it was pretty interesting, saying that and this is a black guy, saying he's so tired of hearing people say, well, if you have to show an ID at the polling place, that's discrimination. And he said, do you think black people don't have IDs? He says, go out.
Yeah, that point's been made quite a bit, Brad.
Right. He says, how racial is that statement that black people don't have IDs like they're they don't. In other words, the idea being that if you don't have an ID, you can't be a functioning member of society on many levels. Once again, the running joke was, I remember when what's his face, Eric Holder was the Attorney General of the United States, and he was against this is they're trying to keep black people from voting. Okay, and he was always after the state of Missouri for the voter ID laws and stuff like that. But yet, if you jumped in your car or drove to or flew to D.C. and wanted to go to the the Department of Justice office, you know what you need to get into the office?
An ID, Brad.
Right, a photo ID. And it's like, well, hold on a minute.
What else is a great ID, Brad? And I should correct myself here because while you've been talking about voter IDs, I looked up this group, Missourians Against the Deceptive Online Gambling Amendment. And Brad, they have received 4 giant contributions. Guess who they've gotten contributions from? This is not a bit, by the way. This is like a real thing.
I have no idea.
Guess who they got money from?
Tell me.
The first one, $150,000 from Caesars. And then they got $1.3 million from Tropicana St. Louis LLC. And then they got $1.4 million from Harrah's North Kansas City. And then they got $1.3 million from Isle of Capri. So Brad, I stand corrected. You asked me based on our, maybe because I probably wasn't clear enough early on, whether casinos were opposing this. And I said, no, of course casinos wouldn't oppose this. Brad, it looks like, I guess the groups that would be in opposition to, I guess, the group that would be in opposition to DraftKings and and FanDuel getting all this revenue. It looks like the casinos have made. Okay, so we got to dig into this further, Brad. But it does look like this campaign has received a ton of money from other casinos.
So it goes back to my statement again. So let me clarify this. By receiving that money, what you've discovered is that the casinos are truly against the gambling amendment, correct?
Some casinos, yeah, but obviously, Brad, groups like DraftKings and FanDuel, who by the way have space in a lot of casinos and are inextricably linked to a number of brick and mortar casinos, so they're funding the sports betting proposition. But it looks like other casinos are coming in, and it looks like as of this, Brad, as of Friday afternoon, by my simple math here, my Hazelwood East math shows that at least $4 million has been contributed to the anti-gambling campaign. Boy, that's interesting, Brad. Now we just got to figure out who the heck Brooke Foster is.
Okay. Maybe we'll call her and see if she'll answer the phone.
We will not.
Okay.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?